Congress, you sponsored it and voted for it. Why did you believe women and girls don't have a right to be free from harassment, to be free from biological men disrobing in front of them without the women or girls having any right to say anything about it or to protest anything about it? Why did you vote?
Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just weeks before the election, the Biden administration is trying to ram through yet 6 more federal judges without adequate vetting from this committee. There are 6 witnesses on this committee. Each senator is given 5 minutes of questioning. That counts up to 50 seconds per judge. They're doing this because the record of these judges cannot withstand scrutiny. I'm going to limit my questioning just to a couple because that's exactly what the Democrats want, is no scrutiny of radical judicial nominees. I'm going to start with Judge Brindisi. Judge Brindisi, should biological men be able to expose themselves to unwilling women, including underage girls?
Senator, that's not a view I share.
So your answer is no.
Senator, I want to be somewhat careful because there are a number of cases that are working.
Is your answer yes? You said that's not a view you share.
It's not.
Then why, just a moment ago, Senator Blackburn was asking you about, as a congressman, you were a congressman from 2019 to 2021.
That's right.
You were original co-sponsor of and you voted for an Orwellian-named extreme piece of Democrat legislation called the Equality Act. The Equality Act mandated that biological men could play in women's sports, could go to women's bathrooms, could go to women's locker room. The women were not asked. The women were not asked if biological men could go into their locker rooms and disrobe with them. You sponsored it and voted for it. You just said a minute ago you didn't agree with men exposing themselves to unwilling women. If you didn't agree with that, why did you sponsor and vote for legislation that would mandate that women be victimized like that?
Senator, it's been a number of years since I sponsored that legislation, and I do understand
it's been 4 years. It's been 4 years.
I understand, Senator. For the last 2 years, I have been serving.
I'm not asking about the last 2 years. You were a member of Congress. You sponsored it and voted for it. Why did you believe women and girls don't have a right to be free from harassment, to be free from biological men disrobing in front of them without the women or girls having any right to say anything about it or to protest anything about it? Why did you vote for that?
Senator, my recollection of the legislation is that it would prevent discrimination based on gender.
Your recollection is contrary to the explicit text of the statute. Are you fond of ignoring the text of statutes?
Senator, as a sitting judge now, and if I'm fortunate to be confirmed as a district court judge, I will follow statutory.
But you didn't when you were a congressman. You sponsored it, you voted for it, and by the way, to be clear, for some reason under Joe Biden, the state of New York really is getting hammered with judicial nominees. Another judicial nominee for New York was Judge Sarah Netburn, who on a similar issue ruled she had a serial rapist in front of her, a 6'2" man who was a serial rapist, who decided to identify as a woman, and Judge Netburn ordered that 6'2" man to be incarcerated with women. Do you think the women in women's prisons have any right, and in particular a right not to be incarcerated, not to have a cellmate who is a 6'2" serial rapist?
Senator, I can assure you, if I become a district court judge, that I will follow the...
But my question is, do those women have any rights not to be incarcerated with a 6'2" biologically male serial rapist?
Senator, I think every person has the right to feel safe, and I can tell you...
Then why did you sponsor and vote for legislation that did not protect that right and violated that right?
Senator, that was a time when I was a policymaker, and I do understand that there...
Okay, so those are your policy views. By the way, so do you have any regrets for sponsoring the Equality Act? You said apparently you didn't read the statute, you didn't know what it said. Do you have any regrets for sponsoring legislation that would force girls and women to be subjected to harassment from naked biological men? Do you have any regrets for that?
Senator, during my time being a legislator in the House of Representatives...
That's a yes or no?
I sponsored thousands of pieces of...
Okay, so you have no regrets about that. All right. In the remaining minute, I'm going to shift to Mr.
It began with the sharp rhythm of Senator Ted Cruz's voice, measured, deliberate, and unrelenting. The kind of tone that signals not a question, but an indictment. The kind that fills a hearing room with tension thick enough to bend the air. Should biological men be able to expose themselves to unwilling women, including underage girls? A silence followed, heavy, expectant, as Judge Brindisi hesitated. The pause was long enough for everyone in that room and every viewer watching to feel the trap close. Because this wasn't a dialogue, it was a test of ideology disguised as inquiry. Cruz leaned forward, eyes fixed, the prosecutor's cadence pulsing with indignation. He didn't let the nominee finish, didn't let context breathe. He wanted a yes or no, and when the answer didn't arrive cleanly, he answered it himself. Here, beneath the bright lights of the Senate Judiciary Committee, the nation's culture wars condensed into 5 minutes of political theater, a confrontation not just about law, but identity, morality, and fear. Judge Brindisi sat composed, his words cautious, every syllable chosen with surgical restraint. But Cruz was not looking for nuance. He was performing conviction, an act for the cameras, the base, the record. His argument framed the hearing as a moral battlefield, one side defending women and children, the other, in his portrayal, defending ideology at their expense. He invoked the Equality Act, an Orwellian-named extreme piece of legislation, he called it, and wielded it like a weapon. His accusation was simple and visceral, that Brindisi, as a former congressman, had supported laws that endangered women by allowing transgender individuals into female spaces. The imagery was deliberate. A 6'2" serial rapist identifying as a woman, a cell full of victims, a nation forced to comply. It was fear sculpted into rhetoric, and yet, behind the intensity, a deeper truth lingered. This was not just a debate over gender policy. It was a mirror reflecting the collapse of genuine political discourse. In a democracy, the purpose of confirmation hearings is to test the intellect, the temperament, the fidelity to law of those who would interpret it. But here, law was merely the backdrop. The real trial was of values: who defines safety, who deserves dignity, and whose pain the nation is willing to acknowledge. When Brindisi tried to answer, to explain that his recollection of the bill was one of anti-discrimination, Cruz interrupted. "Your recollection is contrary to the explicit text of the statute," he snapped. "Are you fond of ignoring the text of statutes?" The nominee's composure barely wavered, but the imbalance of power was unmistakable. It was not just about winning the exchange. It was about framing the narrative that the American left, embodied in this quiet nominee, was willing to sacrifice women's rights on the altar of progressive ideology. And yet, what was lost in that frame, as it so often is, was the humanity of those most affected. The transgender Americans whose lives and identities are debated as abstractions. The women Cruz invoked, whose safety he claimed to defend, but whose experiences were transformed into political ammunition. This is the paradox of our politics today. Compassion weaponized by outrage. For 5 relentless minutes, Cruz wove a tapestry of accusation. He spoke of victimization, harassment, and naked biological men, each phrase calibrated for viral resonance. His words painted a country in moral decline, his tone a call to arms. And yet, amid the fury, what was missing was the law itself, the constitutional principles of equal protection, due process, and liberty that form the foundation of American justice. Judge Brindisi's attempts to ground his responses in those principles, to speak as a jurist rather than a partisan, were overrun by the sound of political thunder. Cruz didn't want jurisprudence. He wanted repentance. This moment, brief as it was, tells a larger story about how hearings meant to vet judicial qualifications have become stages for ideological purification, about how fear has become the most effective currency in American politics, and about how the word freedom itself has been split in two, one side claiming it for protection, the other for equality, both insisting the other is its destroyer. By the end, the rhythm of Cruz's interrogation had turned almost ritualistic. "Do you have any regrets?" he pressed again and again. Brindisi's measured answer that as a legislator he had sponsored thousands of pieces of legislation was met with a curt dismissal. "So you have no regrets," Cruz concluded, sealing the exchange in the certainty of his own narrative. In that instant, the power dynamic was complete. Accusation over explanation, conviction over complexity, theater over truth. But beneath the choreography, one has to ask, what is truly being tested here? Is it a judge's ability to interpret the Constitution, or their willingness to survive public shaming for having once taken a politically inconvenient vote? The line between scrutiny and spectacle has blurred. And as these hearings become ever more combative, the American people are left with the illusion of accountability, a drama that entertains but seldom enlightens. Yet, in every confrontation like this, there remains a chance, however faint, for reflection. Because somewhere between Cruz's certainty and Brindisi's restraint lies the heart of the democratic struggle, the tension between fear and fairness, between moral conviction and constitutional duty. When the cameras cut and the senators leave, that struggle doesn't end. It continues in every courtroom, every classroom, every conversation where Americans wrestle with what freedom really means, and who it includes. This moment will fade from headlines, replaced by the next viral clip, the next outrage. But the questions it raises will endure. Can justice survive politics? Can empathy survive ideology? Can America still hear itself think? Because in the end, it is not the fury that defines us, it is what we learn after it fades. This is liberal freedom, where we look beyond the noise into the truth beneath the theater. If you believe in dialogue over division, in courage over comfort, in freedom that includes every voice, subscribe, share, and stand with us. Because democracy doesn't die in silence. It dies when we stop listening.